Jamie, man, I am excited to have you on the show today, brother. I'm really excited just because of what we're going to be talking about. Our audience has no clue. They're thinking we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and how to kill it in business. And we're going to highlight a little bit of what you're doing and what you're seeing as for success in those in the industries that you serve. But you're a collegiate All-American. You are a retired military officer as well too. You run multiple companies now. You're a father, a husband. You wear many hats, and you continue to strive for excellence in your life, which I absolutely love. Give our audience a little bit of a background, what you did in college, how you got into the military, and then really maybe fast forward us to how you got to the positions that you're holding right now.
Sure. I love to. No, I didn't make it to the pros, like some of us on this call, but no, sports was always a huge part of my life growing up. And actually I did play baseball for 6 years as a kid and loved it. Really did. I loved it. My father was a lacrosse referee though, and we're in Maryland, which is kind of one of the hotbeds of lacrosse, if you will. And he never pressured me to try lacrosse, but then one year I played both baseball and lacrosse, and it was no contest. So I just loved the kind of action of it and everything. And so fast forward, really focused on lacrosse as far as other than, outside of academics, and got pretty good. I went to Gettysburg College. At one point in my senior year, we were number one in the country. And we ended up, I like to reminisce, so thank you. We were number one, and we actually beat both the teams that were in the national championship. But those were the glory days. It really, had a major impact on me and my just kind of foundation, and just being a part of a team and being a part of something bigger than myself was instrumental in I think who I am today. So yeah, I mean, it was, as you know, a ton of time and work and, effort and goes into becoming good at a sport or any kind of craft like that. So I think one thing we might touch on is once I got, everything kind of came crashing down, and maybe not quite as dramatic as your situation was, but I did have a lot of identity wrapped up. My identity was really wrapped up in sports, and then it was boom, gone overnight. So we can talk about that, but yeah, that's kind of some of the background as far as how how lacrosse was a big factor in my life.
Now you went from there, and then did you go into the military right after college?
I did not. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and eventually got a quote unquote real job. And that was actually in the title industry, and then I worked for a mortgage broker for a while. I did try coaching lacrosse for a bit, but wasn't making enough to really make it worthwhile.
Yeah.
The military came into play when I just wasn't satisfied at my W-2. And I just said, I just want something, again, bigger with a little more purpose. I want to do something. I don't want to just earn a paycheck. I want to make a difference. And I think I'm sure your audience can relate to that. So I actually joined the reserves technically. I ended up doing about 4 years of active duty time within my reserves, 8 years. Served in Iraq and went through federal officer candidate school, ended up getting out as a captain. Very happy that I did the military service and was able to serve in that capacity, and became a much better leader and better man because of it. I'm also happy I'm no longer in the military. So yeah. It was really a matter of trying to do something, serve a greater cause, I guess. That was the reasoning behind it.
I love it. We talk about this all the time in our man-made group. I think that men need a vision for their life. And I think that a lot of the reasons why we find ourselves, especially as men, trying different things and going in different directions, some of them not healthy for us, is because we lack clarity. We lack a vision for our life. And for you to be able to go to college, have that vision of what you want to do with lacrosse, work at it, own those skills, become an All-American. And then, of course, as you got into life, you realize that you needed that structure again. And so that's why the military was an attractive avenue for you. And first of all, thank you for your service. we need great men and women to be serving in the front lines for us. We know kind of where we're at as a
Definitely.
country. We know what the world is doing. And you're right. I mean, you kind of made a comment about like, you're glad you're not in it now. And I don't know if you're talking about just because of all the crap that they got going on in the military, but I would imagine that that's probably some of it too. We're just seeing
So that's certainly some of it. It's also that I just turned 47 years old.
yeah, well, that's true too, right? We're not, neither one of us are getting any
But
younger,
no,
but
the reality was I had a lot in this. We can get into kind of entrepreneurship as well, but just a lot going on with family and the just like with anything else, the higher up you go, not, I was a captain. It's lower officer, not crazy high, but the higher up you go in anything, the more responsibility you get and the more commitment that's required of you. And frankly, I got out because it was starting to take too much away from family time. So that gets to priorities and vision and that kind of thing as well. So.
Yeah. Well, right now you have two companies. You one of your companies you buy mortgage notes, and then another one you actually do loan servicing as well too. And we know that like right now that's got to be an interesting market to be in right now. I know that you guys are successful, that you guys are doing really well still, but I got to imagine like just with the volatility of where rates are at, some of it is, I mean, have you been concerned about what the future of what business looks like at all?
Well, there was certainly with COVID, there was some slowdown with regard to transactions and things like that. But the reality is on our mortgage note side of things, we buy notes that have been originated for probably 1 to 10 years. So the truth is it really didn't have a major impact on our operations. We have two different note funds, one that's open currently still for investors. And so we do raise capital and we do put those funds to work to earn a preferred return and hopefully more than that for our investors. But it really hasn't affected things on our side. And actually, I do think we're starting to see an uptick in non-performing notes, which is part of our business model. So if anything, I do think there's more opportunity on the horizon for the non-performing note investor. And, unfortunately with inflation and a slowdown in the economy and a lot of other factors, more and more, we're seeing delinquencies rise with regard to all kinds of debt. But we focus on first lien mortgage notes. That's really my bread and butter right now. I have a background in single family rentals as well, but we also started this servicing company. And I think I need to make it a little more. I know you talked about on my podcast, Josh, you talked about the spokes of the wheel that you have going on with your own businesses. And in some ways it's similar where everything we do relates to single family residential investing, whether that's the physical real estate as a rental property or whether that's mortgage note investing or whether that's loan servicing. They're all kind of connected in some way.
Gotcha. Well, you said you said a phrase there, and I just want our audience to understand exactly what it is. The non-performing notes. Would you just talk specifically on what that is?
Absolutely. So I like to break this down as a lot of people are familiar with single family rental properties and also maybe a fix and flip on a house, right? Rehab and sell the property rather. So a non-performing note, to answer your question, is much like a fix and flip on a property. The difference is we're buying the debt. So we actually become the bank. I'm not a bank, but we step into the shoes of the lender who originated that loan. The borrower is not paying, or they're at least 90 days delinquent. So most of your audience probably pays their bills for the most part, I would guess. Right. So in some, they may be a little bit surprised to hear that people just don't pay their mortgage. Well, that does occur. And in the non-performing note space, we can buy a note at a significantly discounted price because it's a distressed asset, just like a distressed property that has issues. It needs to be fixed, right? Fixed up. So on the non-performing side, we can buy that debt at a maybe 50% of the principal balance, add value to that note. And that's a whole, podcast episode in and of itself.
Sure.
And then there are many different ways to exit that asset. So let me just kind of recap for a second. Performing notes are much like cash flowing rental properties. They keep the lights on. You get a payment every month. You're buying that for yield. Okay. So which is important. A non-performing note, we're buying the debt on a note or mortgage that the borrower is not making payments. How do we, we have to add value to that asset either by getting it reperforming and then selling that as a reperforming note to another note investor at a price point higher than what we paid for it,
Right.
or potentially exiting through foreclosure, deed in lieu of foreclosure. Maybe we get a payoff. Maybe they file bankruptcy. You don't always know, but if you're buying right, you should be able to make a profit. So the non-performing note, there's a more clear entry point and more clear exit point. As far as you're trying to add value and then sell for a profit. Performing note, it's a cash flow play, so you can sell it whenever you want, as long as it's you're not going to add value to it because you paid retail for it. You're going to sell it for retail, very similar to a rental property in that regard.
Yeah, I love the analogy. So I think those are really good. People understand a lot, especially on our podcast. A lot of people understand the real estate world. They've got rentals themselves, so that was a really good analogy to break that down. All right, so let's move on to really what I'm excited about talking about. You mentioned a little bit earlier of your podcast, Adversity to Abundance. And much like both of our podcasts here, what our audiences want to hear is they want to hear the rawness, I think, and people. And
Absolutely.
And they want to know that they're not the only ones on the island that are going through challenging times. And as great of a success story as you have when it comes to the businesses that you're running, the stuff that you did as a collegiate athlete, obviously getting into the military as well too. You've got an amazing wife, you got great children, but you go through challenges and you go through some adversity. And one of the things that you and I were talking about is you have a son that's autistic. And that, that pulls at my heartstring. I've got a brother that has an autistic son, and I know the challenges that they're faced with on just a day-to-day basis. And I would love for you to just kind of to share with our audience, what do you go through that probably people don't know about, but you're able to thrive through it. Not saying that it's always easy, right? But you've made a conscious decision that it's not going to define how you're going to live your life in a negative tone.
Yeah, I mean, there's many ways I could approach that. It is, look, I completely agree with you, and I really appreciate the sentiment as far as life isn't all rainbows and butterflies and unicorns, and that's really what my podcast is about as well. Like you mentioned, it's facing the reality that we all go through hardship, we all go through adversity. That's both on the business and personal side. I don't believe in overnight successes. Anybody who's a success has gone through lots of trials and tribulations. So it's difficult in the moment. It certainly always is. I'm not necessarily seeking out adversity. I don't want more problems, but you do have to, in talking with other people and understanding what other people are going through, you do come to realize, look, no one's guaranteed an easy life. We're going to face challenges. So that to me is comforting to know that this is expected, actually. So it's not a surprise. We don't know how that's going to materialize, but specifically with our son, it has gotten more challenging in the last few months. And we've had some serious struggles with regard to, him not speaking and then getting more aggressive and things like that. So we're working through that. But I mentioned to you before we hit record, I spoke with someone just 30 minutes ago who's going through a very similar situation. And it's helpful to know that, like you said, I'm not on an island. There are others going through this. There are people who have it much worse, frankly. So, you got to keep the focus on your North Star, if you will. And there are positives that have already come out of this. My wife and I are closer because of it. Certainly there are times where we feel like we're further apart because of it, but we've kind of gotten on the same page. And I think our relationship is stronger because of the challenges with my son. So, it's a challenge. It's not over. But I don't think anything in life, anything that's easy really doesn't have much value anyway. So I know that positive things are going to come out of this, and we continue to have hope. It's a challenge.
That's so good. I love that you brought in there that you have hope. Because it's really been a theme already for this year. I was talking to, once again, as you and I spoke earlier, but I was talking to our team earlier this week about, we're 12 days into, or a couple weeks into this new year. And I know a lot of people are already gotten derailed. I know that a lot of people went into this year going, okay, this is the year I'm going to change. I'm going to do this. And they're motivated. And then life happens and distractions come into place. And some of them they're hard. Some of them are things that just completely sideswiped you, family issues, financial issues, things that you didn't expect, or things that you thought were over. I mean, I was talking to a buddy today, and he's like, man, he goes, I'm already over 2023. And I'm like, dude, it's way too early. Like, you can't have this, you can't have that mindset yet. What do you do? What do you do? I love that you brought in the fact that you and your wife, through these challenges, have made a decision and are very aware of the fact that you're growing closer to each other. But what are you doing to make sure that you are moving forward, even in those times of distress, even in those times of challenges that can seem insurmountable?
I think we've, all right. You want to know?
Yeah, that's why I asked the question, dude.
So we did actually go through a counselor ourselves, and it's been really good. And we've been much more intentional with kind of how we approach each other, and been much more appreciative. It's easy to say this; it's hard to describe what that means. But I think just through all of these challenges, probably started with COVID and all this, with just a lot of stress related to everyone being at home and all that. And then with our kids being extra challenging, or at least it's challenging as the next kid, I guess maybe. We eventually decided that our relationship was too important to not have some professional help. And it wasn't a matter of, I'm out of here tomorrow, blah, 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 or something like that. But the reality is, you've had coaches as an athlete. I had really good coaches as an athlete. Why would we not have a coach helping us through this very important relationship? I mean, and I think it's helped my daughter see that a healthy relationship, what that looks like in the household. And so we worked through a therapist, to be honest with you, and set some things in place that have really benefited us. And now it's like, we still need to be intentional about that, but that's a huge stress relief right now, is knowing that my wife and I are on the same page, and now we can work, through these issues as a team. And I guess that's if there's anything we can take away from this, or at least I'm hoping your listener can take away, is that, and I see this on my podcast, how do people get through adversity? Yes, you need to focus on yourself at some point. Yes, you need to acknowledge that you have things going on a personal level. You don't want to pretend you don't have problems. Every single one of my guests, and this is true on your episode as well, Josh, is at some point they focused on others and serving others and being a part of something bigger than themselves, whether that's a team, whether that's a family, whether that's just their organization at work. To me, that's an absolute critical piece to getting through adversity. So I'm hoping that helps.
Well, I got to tell you, buddy, that thank you, first of all, for saying what you said about you and your wife and the assistance that you guys get, because I will say, I think more and more it's common that people are feeling comfortable getting somebody else involved in the most important relationships in their lives. And it should be that way. I 100% agree with you. I don't care how healthy you think your relationship is. If you are not growing at the level that you want to in your personal life with those relationships, you should be bringing somebody in. And I'll be honest with you too. Like Kate, my wife and I, we have an amazing relationship, but there are times where it's not the healthiest. There's times where I'm not the healthiest. There's times when she's struggling, and we have to have those hard conversations. In fact, I think it was about a month ago. Holidays are always stressful, right?
Sure.
Anytime you get into these significant times of the year where there's just so much pressure, there's so many things going on in life. If you're not communicating and you don't have the ability to do that, you find yourselves getting distracted with life. And then you find yourselves kind of slowly moving apart. And that when communication is gone, then of course, so many other things in those relationships are gone. Yeah. And I mean, she and I had that conversation. I mean, I told her, I was like, I'm willing to do anything. If we need to go and talk to somebody just so that we can verbalize the challenges that we're facing, the things that
Right.
we love for each other to grow in, to help each
Yeah.
other and complement each other with.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's awesome.
couple things come to mind. One is just the act of, you know, I think my wife appreciated the fact that I was willing to speak with a counselor, and that goes a long way. Just the fact that we did it, right?
Yeah.
And so then it means, okay, I'm willing to set aside a financial investment and a time investment for our relationship. That means something. And then secondly, just, this goes back to kind of knowing that you will go through trials and tribulations, but life has seasons. And so just because maybe you and your wife are not doing great this month, that doesn't mean your relationship's over or doomed,
Yes.
And I'm not
100%.
necessarily speaking just to you, but just know that, you might have a year that's not so great. That's, it's not ideal, but that happens. And so it's okay to know that, no, you're going to come back together. And as long as you both, actually I remember, this goes back to my young life days a long years ago, but somebody, a guy who was a mentor, he drew a thing where it was like God was at the top, and then you and your spouse or you and your significant other were more at the bottom parts of the triangle. And as you move closer to God individually, you actually move closer together as well. So that's another metaphor or analogy to keep in mind as well.
Yeah. Well, what do you do as you are going through trials and tribulations, as you continuously try to grow your companies? And of course, there's always setbacks in that, whether it's an economic setback, whether it's a financial setback, whether it's a partnership setback. There's always challenges that we're facing. What are you doing to make sure that you are prepared for those challenges to the best of your ability?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I've learned is to try to say, not what if, but even if. So I learned that from one of my podcast guests as well, which is, not what if this happens, what if this happens, what if this happens, because that's how you just build up anxiety and fear over things that probably aren't even going to materialize. But what you can say is even if that happens, we'll find a way. So that's just a minor but important mindset hack. I mean, one of the things, I think this year for me, I'm trying to focus on quality over quantity. I'm trying to tighten up our processes within our businesses. I'm also trying to focus on my own health. And it doesn't mean I'm totally unhealthy, but I guess the challenges we've faced within our family and I have had partnership challenges in business as well. These situations have really helped me put things in perspective and helped me prioritize. So I guess that's what I would say to answer your question is I'm really focused on kind of doing the Pareto principle, I guess, of the 80-20 rule, where you're focused on the 20% that gets 80% of the results. I'm not trying to do everything this year. I'm trying to really focus on priorities, and that is family, health, and the parts of our businesses that are working well. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. You can't anticipate every challenge. I don't exactly know what's going to happen in our businesses, in 12 months from now. But I'm confident that, that we're going to continue to do well. And I think just keeping in mind too, serving others, and it's easy to say that, right? But really trying to serve your investor or serve your client or serve your team that you're working with, I think if you help enough, I think it was Zig Ziglar, if you help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want. Yeah. So you're trying to just kind of be a good listener and be a good leader, and just be ready for what comes. You don't know what it's going to be, but we'll weather the storm.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds a lot like what you're doing now, what you're committed for 2023 is exercising your no muscle a little bit. I think that there's seasons of life where you have to start exercising the yes muscle in order for you to get into those opportunities of growth and start to say yes to those things. But then it gets to that point where sometimes that can be overwhelming. And now you have to look at what season you're in, and that ability to say no to those wild goose chases, or to say no to those things and those projects that you believe that you really should be doing.
Absolutely.
you away from the 20% that you talked about. And I
Yeah.
think that's really good. It seems like that's a season that you find yourself in.
I
Do
love
you
that. Yeah, that's great.
do
Yep.
you find do you do a word of the year by chance?
I don't. Maybe I
Yeah.
should.
Well, it wouldn't be a bad idea. I've just had a lot of conversations. It's John Gordon, and I know they
Yeah,
had
I know who
a
he is.
gentleman on it, but as John Gordon, one word, a one word for your year is the book. It's a super easy, it's a 3 bathroom book. So by the time you go to the
Gotcha.
bathroom
Yeah.
3 times, you'll read that sucker. And but it's a really great thing because it gives you once again that vision for, and or at least helps you get a word for the vision of what you want
Yeah. I've
to
listened to some of his podcasts. He's super positive. I've read a lot of his stuff, and he's very encouraging, inspiring. So yeah, I should implement that.
yeah.
Do you have one this year?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
We've been doing it in our organization. So one of the things that we've discovered is that it's so important for the people that come into our organization, whether they are like a staff member or somebody that is a part of leadership, or if they're an agent or they're part of one of our organizations, we always give them the book because we want them to identify the word that inspires them in all of those areas of life that what you talked about, business, health, and life. We talk about 5 foundations, but you can break it down to just business, health, and life. And for me, it's always a process to discover that word. I usually take the end of the year to do it, and sometimes it comes to me within 24 hours. Sometimes it comes to me in like 24 days. And this year's word is not sexy at all. It's just kind of an interesting, weird word, but it means so much to me. And the word is overflow. And
Okay.
it really comes from a story that happened with me when I was with my youngest daughter, who's 9 years old. I was getting ready to get into the ice barrel. And as I was kind of complaining to her a little bit how cold it was going to be in the morning,
Yeah. Yeah.
she didn't want to have anything to hear about it. And
I
she
love
literally
it.
just looked at me and she just said, Dad, you chose this. And it was just such a
It's so
great,
good.
such a good coaching time,
Yeah.
oh, thank you for that. I needed that kick in the butt. Right. And
That's
so
awesome.
it's a lot like what we talked about today. And that's why I was so excited to be, to be speaking with you. And thank you for being open and vulnerable,
Yeah.
is that everything in our life we've chosen, right? We might not have
Yeah.
chosen the effects of all of the stuff, right? Like you
Right.
could not choose the fact that your son has autism, but
No.
you and your wife had chose to have a child, and you
Yeah.
have this beautiful, amazing boy that is just going through a
Yeah.
challenging time of his life, which is impacting you. But you have chosen to be a father. You've chosen
Right.
to be a husband. You've chosen to have these businesses in your life. And a lot of
100%.
the times, right? A lot of times we play victim to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think of Jocko Willink and the extreme ownership, and people ask him, well, so it's my fault I got cancer or something like, and it's like, no, it's not necessarily your fault, but it's your problem, if you will. And he doesn't say it like that, but
It's your
you got
choice,
to
though,
own,
on
you
how
got
you're
to
going to
own it.
handle it. Yeah.
It's your choice how to respond, and you got to own your situation. I mean, and I do find that liberating, frankly, because there's no one else to blame. It is what it is. Let's take ownership and do what we can to move forward. And I do think, again, there is a time to maybe not even wallow, but there is a time to recognize, look, this sucks. This
Yeah.
sucks, right? This is terrible right now. But I think what gets you moving forward mentally even is action. Just one step in the direction, and then maybe you pivot and make a change. But so and to me, that's part of taking ownership, which is what you're talking about. So how did it, so overflow it plays into that?
Yeah. So overflow plays right into it, because I looked at all of those foundations in my life, and I basically looked and said that, I am responsible for how I show up in every one of those areas.
Sure.
And how do I want to show up? And for me is like, I want to overflow. I want to overflow in my faith. I want to overflow in my faith within myself. I want my presence to overflow when I walk into a room so that people know that I'm excited to be there. I want to
Sure.
overflow in my relationships with my family, my fitness, my finances, and of course, the future that I see and that I want to envision in my life. And so to me, it just gives me power. It gives me excitement to be doing the things that I know that I'm called to do or that I need to do in those areas of my life. So overflowing in every one of them. It's like we always talk about our cups being dry right? Or
Right.
just like, oh, my cup is half empty. My cup is completely dry right now.
Yeah.
To me, the vision is always about the water just overflowing that in that cup. And that's
Yeah.
the mentality that I have to have.
Well, and if I could, I'll just briefly speak. I know we're probably starting to wrap up here.
Yeah.
I in 2015 is when I went part-time. I worked for the Department of Defense, which came out of my military service. So I was a civilian for 14 years. From 2015 until March of 2022, because I ended up leaving my W-2 last year. I worked part-time. All of that is to say that I made a big mindset shift in 2015 where I stopped watching the news. I mean, I was watching cable news, but it's like every night. I mean, and just stopped paying attention to all this nonsense that I couldn't control. And what I'm getting at is, look, that political issues are important. The war is very real. They're very real global issues that I'm not pretending don't exist, right? But the reality is we have a lot more impact and ability to impact and a lot more control over things right around us than we give ourselves credit for.
Yeah.
And one of the first steps, at least for me, was to let go of the things I couldn't control. And so stop worrying about these global issues that personally I don't have any control over. Stop worrying about somebody else's family, maybe pray for them or something, but I don't have any control over that. And because that's a victim mindset or mentality is, or at least it's a weak place to live, even if it's not a victim mentality. It doesn't allow for me to take action and create impact. Bring that focus a little bit closer to home and realize, actually, I have a lot more ability to impact my family, my friends, my neighborhood than I do if I'm focused on all these much larger global issues. So that's just something that really helped me. What I started to do was look around and say, you know what? I'm going to start buying rental properties. My father has been a real estate agent for decades. Mm-hmm. My brother was a loan officer, still is. I worked at a title company. So did my wife. You start pointing to the strengths in your team around you, and you start saying, no, this is what I have going for me. And it's impossible to feel like a victim when you are focused on those, that gratitude and the things that are in your corner. So I just wanted to throw that in there because it was a big shift for me mentally. And I think that can hopefully help your listener as well.
Yeah. Love it, brother. I appreciate it, man. Well, as we do wrap it up, a couple things. One, I just want to remind the people that you do have your podcast, Adversity to Abundance. Everybody go and look that up. You can find that on all of the outlets for podcasts. Jamie, as we end the podcast, I would love for you to just pour into our people. You just gave them some great advice about, hey, listen, stop paying attention to the things you can't control. Start paying attention to things you can control, but pour into them right now. Once again, like I said, we're a couple weeks into the new year. Some people are getting distracted because of the things that are happening already in their lives that maybe they weren't anticipating. Some of them are not motivated anymore, even though they have these big goals that they want to achieve. Pour into them, if you don't mind, as we wrap this up.
I mean, I think it's all about, understanding who you are, but more importantly, life is all about relationships and serving others and being a part of something bigger than yourself. So look around, what matters to you? It's the people in your lives, right? So how can you show up for them? I mean, that's really what gets me out of bed in the morning, is trying to be the best father I can be, the best business owner I can be to help serve my team. And I try to say this to my son. We're not quite there yet, but just trying to focus on others, I truly believe will give you the most purpose and the most value in your own life. So entrepreneurship, I know your listeners are, largely entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. It's not always easy. And frankly, it's not for everyone. And so, I think a lot of it in that regard has to do with understanding who you are and who you're trying to serve. But it's all about people. I mean, that's really what my biggest takeaway is.
100%, buddy. I love it, man. You're absolutely right. It is all about people. And for all of you that are listening to this, hey, go follow Jamie. You know that he's got some great stuff out there. His podcast is amazing. He's got great guests on it. And then, of course, obviously, you guys know the price of admission for this podcast is to share it. Somebody that somebody that's in your circle needs to hear these words of wisdom. I loved it when he talked about the not what if, How about try the even if those things happen in life? So, all right, absolutely love you all. Have a fantastic rest of your day, and we will talk to you soon.